All right, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. It's been kind of busy with all of the conferences in the spring and then summer, all of our obligations. I know a lot of us, we're doing a lot of training with our youth and a lot of in and out of the state to do internal training and just taking care of our staff over the summer. So it was really neat to see a lot of self-care being done in conjunction with continuing to learn. And we wanted to jump back into, since a lot of us, our kids are either in school now or like mine will be back next week. Wanted to get back into the swing of things as soon as possible and kick off the new school year, the new work year for a lot of us with a mini workshop. And we're bringing back this monthly webinar. If you attended our fall prevention conference last fall, you remember Ray did quite a few workshops for us at our fall conference last fall. And the one that you guys liked the most was the one that he's going to be doing today. He's added some information to it, but I thought it was very relevant because it not only connects with the work that we do trying to reach students and parents in hard to reach areas, but also with the new push that the governor and the legislator put into redefining how we deal with our juveniles that have fallen into the justice system and their families, and how are we going to provide supports for them so that they can continue to be successful outside of incarceration. So I thought it would be really neat to kick it off with Ray, because he has a lot of really good insight and input into that field and working with those populations across, not only in Southern California, but he's taught across the nation. So without any further ado, I'll kick it off to you, Ray.
All right, thank you, Dave. So good morning, everybody. And Dave, and thank you so much for having me come out and be able to present this. This is one of my favorite workshops to talk about because at the end, normally when I'm talking with parents, I see these little light bulbs go on in their head and some practical things that they can actually do in the car on the way home in order to talk to their kids. And so, yeah, I love doing this workshop, loving being able to talk about it. It's going to go in 3 different sections. The first section we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about addiction. How does addiction happen? How does the brain, why do we get addicted? The second part is going to be talking about the different languages that youth have as opposed to adults have. And so sometimes when I talk about the different languages, I realize like sometimes, I've been married for 35 years where I mess up and I speak the wrong language to my wife, and how since we've kind of learned this, it clears all that up. And then the last one, we're going to put it all together. And how do you get addiction and language to work for you if you're working with youth? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I love being able to do this, and I hope I'll be able to share my screen because I have some slides that I want to show. But just a little bit on who I am. My name is Ray Lozano. I do travel both nationally and internationally now, talking with adults and youth and teachers and administrators on drug use. And so that's my main focus. I concentrate mainly on junior high and high school kids. So how do you explain, addiction to a junior high student? And so that's what I do. But I come from what you would call a non-use background. Never been drunk, and never smoked a cigarette, never, tried weed or anything like that. But I came from a family that was really crazy when it came to drugs and alcohol. I'm the baby of the family. So between me and my sister, 7 years, between me and my brothers, 14 years, and between me and my oldest brother, 17 years. And so a majority of my family, well, pretty much all of my family had a crazy life when it came to drugs and alcohol. My very first memory at age 5 was watching my 22-year-old brother being sentenced to go to a federal penitentiary for smuggling heroin into the United States. And he started doing that at age 18, and finally at age 22, he got busted on the border. and had to go to federal penitentiary for smuggling drugs in back in the day. My other brother, 14 years older than me, was a drinker and a fighter. And every time he would drink, he'd get really angry and start fighting, and saw him in a bunch of fights. My sister, this is crazy, ran a lot of drugs from El Paso up to Chicago and New York and down to Florida. So she was also a drug trafficker in the United States. And dad was a drinker and a fighter as well. And my mom was one of those alcoholics that's kind of ashamed, I think, of her alcoholism, because every time she would drink and get drunk, she really attempted to act like she wasn't drunk. She'd be walking sideways and I'm okay, I'm okay. I'm like, Mom, you're walking weird, And so I just saw these things as a kid, and just at an early age, I thought, man, it just doesn't seem like drugs work. And so I remember, gosh, like age 7, sitting on the curb while police are going through the house, and I'm just sitting out there. My mom has her arm around me, and I thought, man, it just seems like drugs aren't a good thing. And so that I became really curious about drugs, and it became like a passion of mine. And so what happened is I just had all those questions. Why, as a kid, why is my dad nice and then he drinks and then he fights? Why is my mom nice? She drinks and then she yells at us. Why did my brother smuggle heroin in the United States? Why? And I just needed to have answers for all of this. So I actually did my very first presentation in high school on alcohol, and the teacher was like, wow, that's really good. This is back when you had to go to the library and look through little cards, and all that. And so I did my first presentation in high school on alcohol, and the health teacher really liked it. And then our other health teacher asked me to come over, and every year I just kind of did a little bit new stuff. And then after high school, it's amazing. It took about 7 years, but it turned into this amazing career where I now travel all across the United States talking to kids. So my stuff is just answering questions that I was curious about, but it's turned into this amazing opportunity and career. So one of the things I always tell my junior high and high school kids, if you have any questions while I'm going through this, feel free to ask them, and kind of helps direct where I'm going. I have a plan in my head, but yeah, I definitely want to be able to, get some information across. Let me see. If the host could let me share my screen, that would be terrific. Get on here. Okay, perfect. Let me find it real quick. Here we go. Can you see the addiction one? You guys see that where it says addiction?
Yeah, we can see it right.
Okay, good. All right, so we're going to definitely talk about addiction first, and things that you need to know about the brain, especially when it comes to working with junior high and high school kids, because they think different than we do, and thank goodness that they do. But they totally do think different than we do, because the frontal lobe isn't fully developed. They see the world in a whole different way than we do. And so what is amazing about the frontal lobe is it helps us to do so many things in our life that animals cannot do. For example, everybody watching right now, I could actually send all of you home inside your head and make a sandwich. I could actually have you go to your house, go into the kitchen, figure out all the things you need, and your brain would know what you have and what you don't have. And so youth are able to do that as well, because that's part of what helps them to get to school on time. But the part of the brain that they don't have is the part where they cannot see danger. And so when it comes to dangerous things, youth cannot see that. So for all the adults in the room right now, if I were to tell you, oh, when you leave the office and you go, down about a mile, there's a police officer that hides in the bushes right there, and he gives everybody these speeding tickets. Well, all the adults in the room, because of experience, will say, okay, when I get to that section, I need to go slow, right? Because there's a police officer there. But youth think different. Youth have to test it out in order for the brain to understand if it works or if it doesn't work. So when a youth gets to that spot, they don't think I need to slow down. There'll be a few that do, but there'll be other ones that are like, I'm going to speed up to see if that police officer is really there, because they don't see it. Thank goodness that youth back in the day could not see danger. Otherwise, we'd all be dead as human beings. Because when it came to hunting animals and stuff, if we were a tribe of people sitting around and we were let me see what's happening here on my screen. If we were a tribe of people sitting around and way back in the day, and somebody came out of the bushes with 10 sharp sticks, and they go, hey, there's this big, huge creature about a mile down the road, made out of meat and teeth. Who wants to help me kill it? Well, an old guy like me is going to look at that situation and go, no, I'm okay sitting here making some good decisions because that's how my brain works. But back in the day, youth that kept us alive say stuff like, yeah, let's go get some more sticks. And so they kept us alive. So dangerous things aren't inside kids' brains. So when we present drug and alcohol information, when we talk to them about dangerous things, or when I present marijuana as being dangerous, all the adults in the room are like, yeah, that makes complete sense. But a kid's brain goes, I don't know if that's true or not. I could probably even, figure out how that's wrong. And their brain cannot see it as being dangerous. Hope that makes sense, everybody. If it doesn't, let me know. Here's the things you need to know about the brain, especially when it comes to working with youth. Our brain loves fun. It does. Our brain gravitates towards fun things. It loves fun things. It doesn't like tough things. If you are in a situation and your brain thinks, I don't know if I want to go to that. I don't think it's going to be very fun. You may move away from that or find an excuse not to go. But if your brain knows that it's going to be fun, what'll happen is it'll gravitate towards that thing. And so our brain loves fun. The other thing about our brain is it always looks for easy, especially for youth. The easier it looks to accomplish, a kid's brain will gravitate towards that. Now, of course, you're going to get some youth that are outside, they're the outliers. They won't look for that. But for a majority of students, they'll look for the easiest, fastest way to solve a situation. So when they get into some kind of situation, their brain, because of how lazy it is, and everybody's brain is really lazy, it's going to gravitate towards the easiest answer. So inside our head, we have our best friend and our worst enemy right in there, but it's always going to look for easy. The other thing about our brain is it's unbelievably lazy. It is. And you start adding all these up, it loves fun, it looks for easy, but our brain is really, really lazy. Let me ask everybody that's watching right now, how many of you have like a report that you have to do? I have a grant that I work with, and every month there's a report that's due on situations that I was in, the students that I talked to, conversations that I had, all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm just going to say it's due every Monday, so due on the 1st, right? First of the month is when it's due. And it's got to be there by 12 o'clock noon. Because my brain is lazy, because it looks for the easiest way out, and because that report is not fun to me, right? How long or when do I actually start doing that report? Right. Pretty much everybody that's able to answer right now is saying, that report, you start it, the day before, or you start it that morning, right? And so I usually start it that morning, get up early, and I'm like hammering away, getting all this information together, all the things that are easy to gather, but my brain just doesn't want to do it. And so what happens is I'm sitting there doing this report, totally stressed out. And my brain says, man, I hate this. And then somewhere along the line, I tell myself, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to start this report and I'm going to work on it a little bit every day. So when the first of the month shows up, it's ready to go, right? And I don't know how many times I've told myself that. Let me ask everybody watching, when do you think I start that report all the time? Right? The morning of. And every time I tell myself I'm going to start it a lot earlier, just because our brain is lazy and it looks for the quickest, fastest, easiest way out of every situation. Our brain is so lazy, and I love when I'm able to talk about this in public because I see everybody trying to access information inside their brain. They look up and to the left, and so they're accessing information. Let me show you how lazy your brain is, okay? Your brain say, everybody watching right now, you have a maximum, probably about a maximum of 12 different meals that you eat. That's it. In your house, you rotate through these 12 meals over and over and over again. Some of you, it's down to about 8 different meals, but you continually eat the same thing over and over again. How many of you have ever cooked something new and you're like, the family's like, man, this is great, we should have it again, right? And you're like, yeah, we should. And then you don't see it for another 6 months. And somebody's like, hey, what happened to that chicken dish, right? That's because our brain is lazy and it looks for the easiest way out. And so you need to remember, the younger you are, the more the brain looks for fun, looks for easy, and it looks for lazy. The other thing about the brain is it protects itself. Our brain is constantly in the mode of protecting itself. What that means is the brain never wants to look wrong. And so if you think about it, it's really difficult sometimes to apologize to somebody, because what the brain is doing is it's acknowledging that it's wrong. And the brain hates that. And you can show people that are in a situation that's completely wrong. For example, my sister, who was doing meth and trafficking meth and all that kind of stuff. And I would tell her sister, I said, what you're doing is, wrong. And, it's really dangerous and all that kind of stuff. But her brain was able to justify everything. I mean, literally everything when it came to that. And our brain always protects itself. So you'll find people, like I said, that are doing things that are just way out there. And you're like, it's obvious that all the evidence points in this direction, but you're still going in that direction. And the brain will reinforce what it's thinking constantly over and over again. Big one that goes with fun is the brain doesn't like pain. And this is where we started to get into the drug issue a little bit. But the brain doesn't like pain. It moves away from pain. Our brain doesn't even really like the idea of pain. And so if somebody thinks something's going to be painful, their brain will push them away from that. Now, here's what's crazy about pleasure and pain. And if you read the book, How We Choose by Daniel Pink, he does an excellent job of explaining this. But from what he has discovered is our body is designed for pleasure. It is. Our body does not know what to do with pain. So when we get into painful situations or something painful happens to us, our brain doesn't really know how to think that through. And so what it does is it takes little tiny events that are good. So let's say you find $20 on the ground. Let's say, somebody at your birthday gives you a gift you really wanted. And so you get this great thing and it's super pleasurable to you, but your brain sees it as this little tiny thing. Okay. Now it takes good things and it shrinks it down, but the brain does the opposite with pain. What it does when it comes to pain is the brain increases that. So painful things that are small all of a sudden start to get enlarged into large things. And so I remember seeing this with my mom. My mom, when she was older, her brain did this really well, and it took small painful things and it turned it into this big, huge deal. I remember one time when my mom was older, because when you get older, you start thinking like a kid again. I remember going to the grocery store and her favorite checkout person didn't greet her in the way that she was normally greeted. The way the checkout person didn't greet my mom in the normal way that she greeted her. And on the way to the car, my mom was like, oh, I wonder what's wrong with her today. She must be upset. And by the time we got home, she had built this big, huge thing in her head that this checker was upset with her, when in reality, it might have been something else. And so when it comes to youth, if there's something that's painful, a kid's brain will exaggerate that and turn it into a large event. The next thing that happens with the brain is it loves to belong. It does. Our brain loves to belong to things and it wants to connect to other things. And so I was reading a book about Pablo Escobar, and it was written by his son, and he talked to some of the guys that worked for Pablo. And the thing that happened is they were involved in a situation that they knew was wrong, but they loved being connected to it. They loved knowing that they were belonging. And one of the things that the brain wants is it wants to have some type of legacy. After we're gone, our brain wants to know that people are still thinking about us, or it tries to form this legacy. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to build this thing. I'm going to put my name on this thing, so people knew that I was here and that I belonged to something. Now you have to think about that with kids. There's a great book out there called Chasing the Scream, where this guy interviews all of these drug addicts in Vancouver, British Columbia. And he went up to them and they're homeless and they're living in tents. And he just does this real honest interview with them. And he asked them, he says, do you guys like living this way? Because most people think that you would not like living this way. And they're like, yeah, we totally love living this way. And he goes, give me the reasons why you like living this way. And one of the big things that they said is that they like to belong to a group. And they said, we're connected here. We're friends. I have people that are watching out for me. And he goes, your life could be a whole bunch, could be better or be different if you were living in a house. Stuff like that. And they go, no, we don't want that. Because again, the brain is lazy. So understand this, when you're working with youth, you need to understand these things, because if you can understand all of these things, what happens is you can start getting kids addicted to you and your program because of how it's working. And so let me, sorry, I kicked it back over here. But the thing is, understanding that kids like fun, they look for easy. And the last one, it loves being right. No matter what, and it goes back to protecting itself. The brain loves to be right. So understand this, because I ran a program at Loma Linda University Medical Center where we really focused on all of these things when it came to working with youth. And so one of the things is when kids came to our program, what we were working with is we were working with kids between the ages of 14 and 18 that were in some type of accident or incident where they ended up in the emergency room, and they had to have two criteria for us to bring them into our program. Number one is they had to have some type of drug in their system. So intoxicated or THC or something in their system. And then the second thing is that they had to have been in an accident. And so these kids that were riding their skateboard fell, broke their arm, had marijuana in their system. Before they left the hospital, I would catch up with them and talk to them about our program. So as I was talking to them about our program, the kids sitting there like, no, I'm okay. But since they're under the age of 18, mom would be like, yep, definitely this kid, my son is going to your program, or my daughter's going to your program. So the very first thing that we knew when we invited kids to our program is they thought it was going to be horrible and it was not going to be fun. And so we knew that going into it, and we left that one alone until they got there. One of the other things is we knew that they needed it to be easy. And what I mean by easy is they needed information that was going to be real easy for the brain to understand. So we took out all the medical terms and all that kind of stuff. We knew that the brain was going to protect itself. So when kids came into our program, we knew that they were going to protect themselves and try to defend marijuana. So we took that out of the equation. At no point did they need to defend themselves with marijuana because we didn't present information that way. And so we worked in all of these different things, and we saw a lot of success with our program when it came to that. So take all those things into consideration when you're working with youth, because at the end, I'm going to talk about how we changed the program with probation in the Southern California area and how they started to see success. Now, understand this. Inside your brain, you have this big, huge button. And this big, huge button on it says reward. Now, please understand this. Every single thing you do in life, your brain has to hit the reward button. If it cannot hit that reward button, your brain, has trouble doing that. So let me show you some of the rewards that you can build into your program, some of the rewards that I've helped schools build into their school day, some of the stuff we did at our program, and some of the stuff we did for probation. One of the things is smiling. Just, smiling at people. That goes inside the head and it hits that reward button, okay? If a kid walks into your program or a student walks into your program, it's super important that you remember their name, Because when you say their name, hey, Mark, good to see you. When you say their name, what happens is it goes in and it hits that reward button inside their brain. Now, there's a program I do with adults. It's a 2-day program where I have them for a total of 16 hours. And we go through all this information. And by lunchtime, I attempt to memorize everybody's name. Is it difficult? Sure. But I get probably about 80% right. And the ones that I get wrong, they're still okay with it because I was doing an attempt. But just knowing their name. And then the second thing, if you can back this up with knowing their name, is a conversation that you had with them before. So when they come back the second day for my program, I'm able to, how was dinner? You said you were going to go out and eat last night. Where'd you go? That hits the reward button. And what that does is that endears them to you. Okay. So when you present information, you have a relationship with them. So if you're working with students, important to remember their name, important to have a conversation with them and outside of just talking about drugs and alcohol. And it's important to have that kind of relationship because it's going to endear them to you. And then the other thing that's going to happen is they're going to trust the information that you're giving. So kid walks onto campus. Hey, Mark, how you doing? You smile at him, boom, hits a reward button. Teacher says, man, you told me you were studying. It really shows up on this test. So great job, man. You got an A. Here it is. Good job. As soon as you compliment them for doing really well on a test or whatever they did, boom, it goes in and it hits that reward button. They walk that test home. They may be embarrassed. They show mom and dad and they're like, hey, man, look, I got an A on this test. Mom and dad or whoever is watching them looks and goes, oh, man, that's awesome. Let me take that. I'm going to stick it up on the refrigerator, right? Now, the thing is, a kid may seem like they're embarrassed by that, but trust me, it goes in and it hits the reward button. And so all these things have to hit the reward button and your brain will gravitate towards that thing, okay? Now, that's where you start getting kids addicted to your program because you're going to go inside their head, and you're going to hit that reward button. Now, every time that reward button gets hit, ding, right? Say their name, ding, smile at them, ding, compliment them, ding. Every time you hear that ding button, what your brain is getting, I'm going to make this super easy for you, is a chicken nugget, okay? And so your brain is going to get a chicken nugget. Now, that chicken nugget isn't made out of chicken. It's made out of norepinephrine. It's made out of, all these feel-good chemicals, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and all these super good feel-good chemicals. And that's the only thing that your brain is really going to eat, okay? And so all these chemicals get released inside your brain, and your brain gravitates towards that because that's what it's going to eat. Now, I don't know if there's any vegetarians out there, but if you are, your brain gets a soy nugget, okay? And so, yeah, you still get a nugget. I love saying that because it makes me feel so Hispanic, soy nugget, that'd be my gang name. Watch out for a little chicken nugget, right? And so the thing is, it's going to have to hit that. So you want to hit that reward button. And I hope that makes sense. If any of you have questions, put it in the chat and I will eventually see it sooner or later. But the thing is, your brain is going to hit the reward button, okay? Let me go back to sharing my screen here real quick. And come on. Okay, reward button. So your brain is going to have to hit that reward button, and that's the only thing it's going to hit. Now, once your brain starts to hit that reward button, the individual will start gravitating towards that. When I'm working with parents, I tell them you need to figure out inside your child's head what hits that reward button. So with my son, our first child, my son's reward button was hit by competition. And so we did paintballing, we did, miniature car racing, we did all that kind of stuff. But his brain really gravitated towards competition things with dad. Sometimes dad would win, sometimes he would win, but his brain gravitated towards that. So when we had our daughter, I thought, I got this all figured out, right? Competition. Nope. That did not hit my daughter's reward button at all. And as a matter of fact, it was like the complete opposite of a reward for her. So for her, spending time together. So the thing is, it has to hit the reward button. All right, so your brain is hitting the reward button. Now let me show you these two things, okay? Number one, our brain, and we're gonna wrap all of this together because I wanted to make sense to you on how you need to run your program or some ideas to put into your program. Once your brain hits a reward button, there are two systems two systems that are built into your body that you don't even need to think about. And with these two systems, this is how you can start getting kids to gravitate towards you and have an impact on them. And I'm going to talk about how we did it in our program. Number one is everybody's brain wants to survive. It does. Our brain wants to survive. It wants to have food. It wants to have shelter, but our brain wants to survive. Our brain loves the idea of survival. It loves hearing the story of the person who looks like they weren't going to make it. And then all of a sudden they went through this trial and then they made it. It loves the story of the husband and wife that got trapped in a snowstorm and, it was freezing cold outside and the husband bundled up and he walked 3 miles and it was super difficult, but he finally got to this place and found a police officer and they went out and they rescued his wife. We love those kind of stories. The news knows that we love those kind of stories. Next time you're watching the news and it's at the top of the hour and they want you to come back, they know that they just put your brain through this meat grinder. And so at the end, and I watch a news station that does this, perfectly, right at the top of the hour, they show you that story of the lady that's working in the community and making this big impact. Because our brain gravitates towards that. It loves the idea of survival. Everybody watching right now, if you want to put something in the chat here in a second, let me show you how much our brain loves survival, okay? And I bet you don't even think about this, but think about your favorite movie. The movie that you love to watch, the movie that you have seen 100 times, maybe even more, the movie that you quote, when you're in conversations, or if you were to watch this movie, you would be able to
with 91012.
Hello. Oh, the movie that you would quote over and over again. What movie is that? Get that movie in your head. Okay. Everybody got that movie in your head? Good. Now, the thing is, my wife's movie is Forrest Gump. She loves that movie. And if you think about it, it's about survival over and over and over and over and over again. And he goes through all these different things, sometimes aware, sometimes not aware, like the Vietnam War, but he comes out and he has survived. My movie, another favorite Tom Hanks movie, is Saving Private Ryan. I love that movie. And it really hits inside my head because number one, it talks about survival. And number two, it talks about legacy, leaving a legacy. And so think about that when you're working with kids, because their brain wants to know that they are going to be able to survive. Their brain wants to know that it's going to have a place where they are surviving. And so when you can build that into it, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, if their brain knows that it's going to survive and it's going to be okay, it's going to make a difference in the way that you run the program. The other thing is, once your brain has survived, so let's say we are a tribe of people, we're sitting around a fire, and way back in the day when we lived in caves, we all look around and we're like, yeah, you know what, we have got this all figured out. Everything looks good. We got a river over here so we can get fish. There's vegetation over here, so we know we're going to have food. We have a place, a shelter. We know we're going to survive. What do you think the next system that kicks in is? Okay, think about that for a second. Once we know that we're all going to survive as a tribe, what is the next system that we have that's going to get kicked in? Take a minute and think about that, and I'll put this up here, right? The next system that we have is, right, we want to make more, right? And yeah, so I'm presenting to junior high kids, so I don't want to have to try to explain this too much, but we want to make more. We do. And so for animals, it is just the basics of making more, right? So every rabbit wants to make more rabbits. Every lion wants to make more lions. Every bear wants to make more bears. It just is a survival thing that we have inside of us that's built into us, okay? I love watching National Geographic. And they had, I was watching a couple days ago, these two lion brothers that are born together. And so they grow up together. They're really, brothers in every sense of the word. And so they show them growing up, and then they show them, getting too big, and the tribe has to kick them out, and they have to go find their own pride. And then, they're searching and they have to fight hyenas and they do everything together as a brother. Then finally they kick an older lion out and they take over that lion's pride with all the females and everything. And you could tell, man, they're like, we did it. We're brothers, man. We're together in this whole situation. And they grew up together and everything. When is the only time that these two brothers that have fought together, have done all these things together, when is the only time that they are ready to kill each other, right? Right, exactly. When that female comes into heat, all of a sudden they're not brothers anymore. And so the thing is, that is how strong it is that they're willing to break that bond. Now, because we are human beings, we work a little bit different. And so making more just isn't the thought of, making more. It's having a deep relationship with somebody. And so even though it seems like kids don't want that, it's what the brain gravitates towards. It may not that they want to have a deep relationship with you, but they definitely want to have a deep relationship with another individual. Because once they have filled up the survival, food, shelter thing, the brain kicks into the next one, which is making more. Think about this. Let me show you how ingrained this is in all of us, and you don't even think about it. For those of you that are working at a nonprofit organization, and I've worked at plenty of them, right? So there's 4 of you that have this great idea, stuff that you want to do with kids, all of that kind of stuff, and you're kind of bumping along, and you are, having these dinners where you're trying to raise money, and then all of a sudden you get a grant, right? And this grant is for, a certain amount of money, and then all 4 of you look around and you're like, whoa, you know what? This is pretty good. It looks like we are going to survive, right? We're going to be okay. And so you have this grant. So what's the next thing you want to do? Well, man, we're going to survive. We're going to be okay. The next thing you want to do is you definitely want to increase what you're doing, right? And so you will bring on more people, and then you will look for more grants. And it's just the way that our brain works. Think about every kid in high school that's part of a cheerleading club, right? What do they tell all the kids in cheerleading club? Hey, bring your friends in, right? All the kids on the football team, what do they tell those kids? Bring your friends in, right? If any of you attend a church, or you're part of a community organization, or you go to some type of community event, what do they always tell you? Bring your friends in, right? I'm part of the Elks Association, and I do speaking for the Elks. And so it seems like every meeting that I'm going to, not every meeting, but quite a few, they're like, hey, you know what? Bring your friends in. We got a place. We know we're going to be okay. So start bringing your friends in. Ask your friends to come in. And that's one of the big things. Church, same way. You know what? Bring your friends in. Because it's just the way that the brain is designed and the way that the brain works. Okay. So you need to understand all of these things, especially how the brain is working. Because the brain loves fun. It loves easy. It wants to make more. It wants to survive. And these are things that are built into kids' brains, just the way that the system works. Now, let me back that up real quick. Oops. Okay. Survival mode. Let's say you, at the end of this event, you go out and you have lunch with a friend. I know I already showed the numbers for those of you that were watching, but let's say like on a Friday night, okay, you get together with a friend, you go down to some Mexican food place, or you go to Starbucks, or you do something and you have a little meal together. You tell stories, struggles, all that kind of stuff. You kind of laugh, you have a good time. Just sitting down, having a piece of cake with somebody and sharing stories, that goes inside your brain and it hits that button 200 times. 200 times is how often that button is going to get hit just by sitting down, having a piece of cake with somebody. All of you right now, think of your favorite event, something that you attended recently, where you had a good time. Was there food there, right? And it's so hard to go to a conference. It's so hard to go to any type of event where they aren't offering coffee or cookies or cakes or cupcakes or even a full meal, because without thinking about it, that adds to that event, okay? So the thing is, survival goes inside and hits that brain 200 times. I was just watching this study where they took 10 little mice and they put them in this cage, and this cage had everything mice like to do. a wheel to run in, yard to hide in, a yarn, tubes, everything a mouse would dream of, right? And they put food inside the cage, everything a mouse would like to eat. And then they took these little mice and they injected them with this thing called the dopamine blocker. And so what this dopamine blocker does inside this little mouse is it does not receive any kind of pleasure from eating. What do you think happened to the mice? Sure enough, they all died, right? And what did they die from? Starvation. Because the mice did not get any pleasure out of eating, they didn't get any kind of reward out of that. Yeah, even though they were hungry and there was food there, they didn't eat, right? Isn't that crazy how the brain works on that? Every time I tell that story, I'm like, I would love a little dopamine blocker like that, right? So I didn't get so much pleasure out of Taco Tuesday. And so the thing is, I just want something to kind of block it every now and then. So, but the thing is, just having that one event, doing that one thing goes inside your brain and it hits that event 200 times, right? And so that is just crazy how that works. And so 200 times, all right? Now, if you have a deep friend, okay, and you spend time with them, and then you go through some kind of struggle, and as you're going through that struggle, you sit down, you have a little piece of cake with them, and you're able to share your heart with them. And instead of them laughing at you or going, you're dumb, they actually get involved in your life and they share that struggle with you. So you cut it in half. What happens is that will go inside your brain and it will hit that reward button 400 times. Now, these are big numbers for the brain, 200 and 400 times. I don't have time to explain uptake and adrenaline and norepinephrine and all that kind of stuff. Just understand that it goes in and it hits this reward button. If you're looking for more information on this, there's stuff on my website on all of this. And so the thing is, it goes in and it hits that brain 400 times. Now, let me ask you this. If somebody does a drug like opium, meth, or heroin, okay, some of those feel-good drugs, or if a kid smokes weed or drinks alcohol, okay, that's going to be a different number. But opium, meth, or heroin, how many times do you think it goes in and it hits that reward button? Take a minute, think about it real quick. If 200 is a big number and 400 is a big number, how many times do you think it goes in and it hits that reward button? Check this out. Anytime somebody uses a drug, it goes in and it hits that reward button 900 times. 900 times. So the thing is, it very slowly sometimes or very quickly hijacks the brain and it starts to unwind those other two systems. Remember, the brain is lazy. The brain looks for fun. The brain gravitates towards whatever gives it the biggest reward. So I'm going to give you an example of my sister. Back before my sister started doing meth, we were super close. She lived a couple of houses down from us. I had a key to her house. She had a key to my house, right? And so she would come over, her and her family. Sometimes I would come home from work, or my wife and I would come home from work. I'd find my sister in the kitchen cooking something. She said, I wanted to make this. She came over and her kids would be watching TV. I didn't care. I loved it. It was fantastic, right? Because it was hitting the survival button and it was hitting the relationship button, right? And then all of a sudden, my sister found meth. Just out of, I don't want to say out of nowhere, because she had been a drug addict for a long time and then clean, and then she found meth. So the first time she used meth, it hit that reward button 900 times. Now the brain, still getting used to meth, wanted to incorporate the other things. So my sister would use meth, right, 900 times. Then she would come over to the house and we'd have a relationship. So there's an additional 400. So now it's 1,300 times. And then we would eat something, which is another 200 times. So now her brain was getting hit 1,500 times with the reward system. And her brain was saying, I love this. This is fantastic. Let's keep doing this over and over again. But after a while, her brain got lazy, right? And it's like, I don't know if I want that 400 because I'm getting the 900 with meth. So instead of having a relationship, it started to change quite a bit. And it went like after about 4 months, it went to a place where my sister and I were hanging out to now my sister was only catching up with me every now and then. And it was usually when she wasn't using meth. because she knew what I did. You know, we had that conversation 1,000 times. And then pretty soon, the whole thought of survival or relationship was gone. And then the survival part of her brain started to leave her as well. So when my sister got $500 in from some charity, or somebody was helping her out, or mom and dad gave her money, because her survival mode was gone and her relationship part was gone. When my sister got $500, did she think, oh, cell phone bill, gas in the car, groceries in the refrigerator, pay rent, then buy meth? No. Her brain had been rewired by meth, and it goes, I want the quickest, fastest, easiest reward that I can possibly get. And so the thing is, her brain didn't think all those things. It thought what? Meth, right? And then it thought, you know what? I don't need those other things. And if there was like $40 left over after she bought meth, what did she do with that? More meth, right? So you have to understand this when you're working with your kids. When you're working with kids that have gone through maybe something traumatic, and that's one of the reasons why they smoke weed, or they want to belong to a certain group, and that's why they smoke weed, you have to understand their survival mode and their relationship mode is still working. But if you come against them when it comes to drugs and alcohol, what you're doing is you're attempting to take away that reward button. I saw this with my sister over and over again, and I had to change the way that I interacted with my sister, because I would have a point where I'm like really driving the point home how meth is terrible. But then I realized for her, that is her survival mode. That's how she is surviving. And so we're going to bring all this together, and feel free to ask questions as we go along. But I want you to understand this, because I see so many youth programs and how they run it and how it's attempting to take away the reward system. And the brain's like, I don't want that. Now, here's the different languages, okay? And so we're going to talk about the languages that kids speak, but keep all those things that we just talked about, the brain and the reward system, in your head, because we're going to start wrapping it all together in a super nice package here. But as you can see on the screen, there's a small I and a large E, okay? I stands for intelligence, E stands for emotion. 4 or 5-year-olds think with very little intelligence, a whole bunch of emotion, okay? So I was just watching a video the other day that was so funny on TikTok, and it's a great example of this, where this little kid went to reach his hand into this cookie jar, and the mom is like, no, and he like puts his head down and he just starts crying really hard, right? Because he's having this emotional reaction. He's crying really hard, and then his little hand goes back up there and tries to reach into the cookie jar, and the mom's like, no, right? And he just starts crying really hard, because everything is this big emotional thing that happens to a kid just because of how the brain is operating. Because of lack of experience, the brain operates on emotion. Child sitting down watching TV, you change the channel on the child, what do? They cry, right? Child has their favorite blanket, you take that blanket away from them, what do? They cry. Child wants to go outside, they can't go outside, you tell them, nope, you can't go outside, what do? They cry. Child wants a cookie before dinner, they can't eat that cookie, what do, right? They cry. Time to go to bed, child doesn't want to go to bed, what do? They cry, right? Child wets their pants, what do? Cry, right? And so the thing is, it's this big, huge emotional thing that happens to a child. Now, the brain doesn't start thinking different until right around age 21. So if you're working with youth in your program, the thing is, their brain is thinking different than your brain, okay? So the thing that you need to know is kids talk on an emotional language, not an intellectual language, okay? Now, for you guys in this room, you think like this, intelligence, right? And so you think with your intelligence as opposed to emotion. So at age 5, the brain starts to change. 15 and 16, the brain is going through a really big change. And one of the things that you need to understand with 15 or 16-year-olds is their emotional level is way bigger than their body and their brain. So everything is this big, huge emotional thing that happens to them. Age 21 is where the brain starts to level out. It's right around age 25, our brain is now in the part where it has figured everything out, And after age 25, it's collecting information to reinforce what it believes, okay? So all of you in this room, you think off of intelligence, right? You don't think off of emotion so much. So the thing that happens is you're sitting down watching TV, right? And somebody changes the channel on you. Most of you don't cry. You figure out how to change the channel back, right? You have your favorite blanket. Somebody comes and they take your blanket away from you. What do? You get a better lawyer, right? Somebody, tells you you can't go outside. You want to go outside, right? Because you're thinking with intelligence. So you don't cry about it, but you figure out how you're going to get outside, right? There's a cookie there before dinner. You shouldn't eat that cookie. You want that cookie, right? What do? You eat the cookie, use intelligence. Time to go to bed. You're not ready to go to bed. What do? You stay up. Your brain uses intelligence, right? You wet your pants. What do? Of course, you cry a little bit because there's some emotion left right there. But understand this, you think different because you are functioning with intelligence. Now, everybody look at that scale right there, because let me show you what will help you when it comes to arguments or how to present information to kids, okay? So you have I and E, and you have the big I, or the small I, the big E, the big I, the small e, okay? Now, when you're looking at arguments that are happening, and I don't want to cause any problems or anything, but let's just take, we went through this pandemic. And so you had two sides of the argument when it came to masks, right? And you have to understand when these two languages talk to each other, the problem is they hate each other. They do. So the more emotion talks, intelligence looks at that and it goes, man, you're dumb. You don't know what you're talking about. The more intelligence talks, the more upset emotion gets, right? And again, I'm just going to take the argument that you saw all over the news when it came to masks, because you had two different sides. Not taking a side, not starting an argument. I'm just telling you how it works. Okay. So you had one side that's like, this is my freedom. This is what I'm allowed to do. And it was all based on emotional things, right? But then you had the other side of the argument. Oh, you need to protect stuff, science. You need to believe in science and all that kind of stuff. And the more this side spoke, this side got mad. The more this side spoke, the more this side got mad. And instead of looking at each other, trying to figure out, where's the middle ground on this? The brain has to protect itself. So what does it do? It invalidates the other side, right? So it's like, that person's stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no clue, because the brain needs to protect themselves. You need to understand this when you're running a youth program, that if you come against kids in drugs and that's what you're working with, and you don't have that relationship with them, they're going to attempt to invalidate you by putting you down. And we do this all the time. And so that's the only way that our brain can figure out how to do that. Now, when I was working with kids, we saw this all the time. And I had so many kids raise their hand and go, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because their brain is attempting to invalidate me. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Maybe my brain doesn't know what it's talking about. You can look all this information up if you want. If not, you don't have to do anything with this information. And all of a sudden, the brain realizes, oh, maybe I don't need to protect myself against this guy because he's not coming against me. Same type of thing when it comes to arguments. And so what happens is the brain wants to have an argument in there because, again, it wants to defend itself. So the thing you need to understand as you're running a youth program, you want to be able to run it and speak an emotional language to kids. All of you has spoke it, you remember it, you know how it works. The example I love on this, let's say David and I, well, we're good friends. But let's say David and I live next door to each other, okay? And me and David have been friends for 25 years. I think David's a great guy. He has my house key. I have his house key. We go on vacation. David takes care of our house. You know how those friends work, right? I have a barbecue. David's definitely going to be there. He has a barbecue. I'm definitely going to be there. We watch sports together. We do all that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Super good friends. So then what happens is one day I hear this knock on the door, right? I go to the door and I see my buddy David is all tore up. And you can tell he's been crying. Man, he just looks in bad shape. And I look at him, and Dave, I hope you haven't had a pet die on you recently. I forgot to ask, but yeah. And I look at Dave and I'm like, Dave, what's wrong? And he looks at me and he goes, you know, our yellow lab buddy. And I'm like, yep. He goes, he just died. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible, right? Dave's crying and he's upset. And I look at my best friend Dave and I'm like, Dave, come on in, man. I kind of thought this might happen. I saw he was getting older, wasn't getting up as quick. So you know what I did for you, Dave? Man, I spent like 8 hours doing this for you, man. I made this incredible PowerPoint presentation for you. Sit right there, Dave, at the kitchen table. Let me get my screen out and show you this cool PowerPoint presentation, right? So I showed David for about 30 minutes, this incredible PowerPoint presentation. It has photos of Buddy. It has a pie chart. It has graphs. It has statistics. It shows all this information about yellow labs. And I talk about, oh, yellow labs usually get cancer right around age 12, but your dog did not, right? And I said, isn't that great? The more PowerPoint presentation I showed Dave, is Dave thinking inside his head, man, this guy really cares for me? Or is he thinking, this guy is a complete idiot? I don't know how we are even friends, right? It is definitely the second one. Because what is happening? David is coming to me and he's speaking an emotional language. And what am I doing to David? I am talking intelligence to him, right? I realized this in our marriage when I switched over. And when my wife talks emotion to me, man, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Instead of me trying to fix her problem with intelligence, I'm like, all right, let me jump into this emotionally, right? And so I'm just like right there with her on an emotional level. Now, the thing is, when she comes to me with intelligence, man, we're having some problems with the car. You know, I don't sure the tire light came on. I don't know what that means, or, you know, or we're having some kind of issue that needs me to come in and talk to her on an intelligence level. The thing is, then we're able to have that discussion. So I always match whatever it is. And the same thing with me. So the thing is, Dave shows up. We're going to talk in emotional language now. Dave shows up. He's crying. He looks terrible. I open the door. I'm like, Dave, what's wrong? He looks at me and he goes, my yellow lab just died, right? Everybody watching right now, what does Dave need? What does David need, right? He doesn't need intelligence. Probably a bunch of you are thinking it right now. David needs a hug, right? He does, because he's coming at me in an emotional language, so he needs an emotional reaction. So I throw my arms around Dave, hug him for a long time, right? He cries, I cry with him, right? After a while, my shoulder's all wet and everything like that. And I said, Dave, sit down, man. Let me get you some tea. So I give him a glass of tea and I sit down and I just listen to him. That's all I do. And so after a while, you know, I'm able to work in some stuff. And I look and I go, oh my gosh, Dave, you know what? Man, that dog was a good dog, buddy. You know what? And I don't think you had very many problems with him either, right? I know most yellow labs get cancer right around age 12, but Buddy didn't, right? Like, no. Yeah, most labs only live to be, you know, 14, but I think Buddy lived to be 16, right? He's like, yeah, he did. Am I giving him the same information that my PowerPoint presentation did? Exactly. But what I am doing is I am giving it to him in an emotional language, not an intellectual language. Understand this. That's what you need to do and it depends on what type of kids you're working with. But what I have found is when I'm working with kids in probation, this works great. I don't try to give them information. What I do is I ask a lot of questions. When I was working at Loma Linda and we would bring kids in, we would have 2 counseling sessions with them at the very beginning. Then they'd go through these classes, and then we'd have a counseling session at the very end. And so kids walk in and I know immediately they are going to defend themselves because that's just the way that the brain works. So what we did at the very beginning is all we did is we asked questions. That was it. You know, real simple questions, things that they could answer super easy. You know, what are your grades like? Oh man, they're terrible. Okay, they're terrible. Why do you think they're terrible? Do you think it might be because you're smoking weed? No, it's because of that teacher, right? If that teacher wouldn't grade like that, I wouldn't get bad grades. Makes sense to me, man. You know, what's your home life like? Terrible. My mom's always on me. You think it's because you smoke weed? No, it's just my mom. If my mom would just relax and chill out, it wouldn't be such a hard thing. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? So whatever they said, we would immediately agree with them, okay? And so we would agree with them because we're having a conversation, but it wasn't an agreement because we're adding all this stuff up at the end, you know. Why are you in this program? Stupid probation officer told me I had to come to this in order to stay in school. I'm like, okay, do you think he's sending you here because you smoke weed? No, he's sending me here because of, he's got this thing against me. So every time we would talk to them, it was always something was against them. It was never marijuana. And that made complete sense to me because I understood they are defending marijuana. The brain wants to be right. The brain wants to belong. The brain wants to be connected. It wants to have friends that help them survive. It wants to have a deep relationship. So if I start attempting to take all those things away, the brain is going to go into this safety mode, right? And then it's going to not allow me in. So no matter what they said, we would agree with it. Okay. So then we would run them through these classes that were super easy to understand. Kids didn't have to defend themselves. About the third class in, because they knew other people in there, they felt like they belonged and all that kind of stuff. Then when we would get to the end, all of a sudden we had a relationship with kids. They trusted us with our information. For those of them that wanted to look it up, fantastic and stuff. And so at the very end, I go, man, you know what? You did really good in this program. Bing, hit the reward button. I'm really proud of you, man. You went 7 weeks without using, all that kind of stuff. I said, do you think you'll go back to using weed? And like sometimes most of the kids would say no. Majority of them would say no. Someone would say yes, or I'm not sure, we'd get that kind of answer. I'm going to go. And then I would tell them, I'd say, do you remember that conversation we had 7 weeks ago where we talked about all this stuff right here? And they're like, yeah. And I'm going to go, you know what, man, you're a pretty smart kid, but I'm going to be honest with you. When you smoke weed, you're not very smart. And they look at me and they'd be like, what do you mean? I'm like, I know so many kids that can get straight A's when they smoke weed, but I'm not putting you down, but you're not one of those kids. And they would kind of get a little bit shocked. And I know kids that can smoke weed and still have a good relationship with their folks. You're just not one of those kids. So in order to keep all these good things happening in your life, I'm just going to recommend you not smoke weed. And all of a sudden it changed the way that they thought. This is crazy. And some of you are going to be like, I don't know if that's true or not, but it just was amazing to me. Loma Linda did a 3-year study on our program. And so they kept track of every kid that went through our program for 18 months. They surveyed them when they came in. They surveyed them when they graduated. They surveyed them 4 months out, and then another 4 months out, and then another 4 months out. So they kept really close track of these kids. What they found out, once these kids graduated, we had a 93, and you heard that correctly, a 93% success rate of kids not going back to drugs or alcohol 18 months after graduating this program. It was crazy to me. And so they asked what we were doing different, but we were working with kids on a kid level and the way that their brain works. So we were taking everything that the brain does for addiction, and we were using it to get them addicted to our program. A 93% success rate. Probation department came to us because they heard about us. And the main guy, district attorney, came up to me and he goes, man, I saw that you have a 93% success rate. I'm like, yeah, we do. He goes, we're happy with like a 10, 15% success rate. He says, will you come and show us what we're doing wrong and why we aren't getting a 93% success rate? So me and my team, me and 3 other people went over and we sat through their programs for probably about a month and a half, 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, we wrote up this report and everything. We sat in front of the district attorney, all of his people and stuff like that. And he looked at us and he goes, what's wrong with our program? And I said, well, we did find some stuff that you are doing that isn't really beneficial to kids. And he goes, the next question he asked, and I could see everybody had been thinking about this. He goes, how much is this going to cost? And I said, it's not going to cost you anything. And he goes, we can fix this program. It's not going to cost us anything. He goes, yeah. I said, I got some suggestions for you. He goes, what is your first suggestion? He asked us that. So I was a little embarrassed to answer him. And I said, you know what? I says, the problem is your probation officers are coming out there and they're not making a connection with the kids. There's no kind of relationship that's happening. I said, your probation officers come out there and they look at all the kids and they got their badge on and everything. And they come out and they look at the kids and go, kids, you need to stop smoking weed right now, because most kids that smoke weed don't go to college. And most kids that smoke weed end up getting in trouble. And most kids that smoke weed, and are they giving the kids great information? Yes, but their brain doesn't absorb that stuff. And so he goes, all right, do we not give information like that? And I said, no, we're going to start a little bit further back. He says, what do you want us to do? I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to have your probation officers just every now and then when they're presenting that type of information right there, just smile at the kids. That's it. Just smile at them. And how often, those of you that are watching, how often do you think a probation officer smiles at one of their kids, right? I'm going to say it's pretty rare that it happens. So the district attorney and all those people looked at me and go, you want us to smile at the kids? I said, yeah, just try it. Let's just smile, right? We were monitoring everything. When the kids showed up, how they were dressed, age, all that kind of stuff, right? Program started at 9. If they were there at 9:09, they got credit for the class. If they were there at 9:10, they did not get credit for the class. So when did most kids show up? 9:09, right? So this probation officer, great guy, Larry. Larry comes out and he gets ready and he walks out there and you can see this is going to be brand new to him, right? And he looks at the kids and he's like, kids, all of you that smoke weed, right? Most of you will not end up going to college because you smoke weed. He looks at all the kids and he goes, and all the kids are like, is this guy having a stroke? What's happening? But the dude was attempting to smile at the kids. During that course thing, you could tell it was all forced, but he was trying. And so he would just smile at the kids, or he'd call on again, like, hey, Mark, and then he would smile. I said, say their name, smile. That's it. You know what we saw after a couple of weeks of kids, probation officers, we saw this tiny little tick in the clock. Instead of kids showing up at 9:09, kids were showing up at 9:02 or 9:03. And that was like a big deal because these kids, didn't like these classes. So then they were pretty excited about that. And they go, what do we do next? I said, how much is it going to cost us to fix this program? I said, it's still going to be pretty cheap. And he goes, what do we have to do next? And I said, you know what's going to save your program? If you're taking notes, get ready to write this down, right? If you're working with kids in probation, stuff like that, they're all sitting at their desks, they're ready to write it down. Like, what is the answer to our problem? I said, cookies. Your program needs cookies. And they look at me like, cookies? And I'm like, yep. I said, the problem is, let me show you this. 8:55, we walk out to the front gate. I says, let me tell you the scenario, right? This kid's in trouble. So wherever mom or dad picked them up, they picked them up and they hollered at their kid from the place that they picked them up to the point where they dropped them off right here, right? So this kid's already being hollered at. So his brain is not in, let me get information mode. It's in defense mode, right? And I said, then watch what happens. He's going to come up and he's going to meet this guy that works the gate right there. Is that guy going to smile at him? Nope, not at all, right? And then the kid's going to have to walk into the building where there's going to be this person behind this big, huge, thick glass that's going to be rough on, what are you doing running late? Head over to the x-ray machine. X-ray machine's not going to smile at them. So we changed that whole environment. So I said, cookies is going to fix your problem. So I went out to the front gate guy and I asked him, I said, Mark, I said, what is your favorite cookie? I don't want to have a conversation with you. I just want to know what your favorite cookie is. Like, I really like peanut butter cookies, right? Person behind the counter, what's your favorite cookie? Sugar cookie. Cool. X-ray guy, what is your favorite cookie? Chocolate chip. Everybody in the offices, what are your favorite cookies, right? And so everybody gave me their favorite cookies. There's about 4 different types of cookies. So they gave me a budget and I bought cookies. So about 30 minutes before the program started, I walked out to the front gate guy, the guy that ran the thing. I handed him this bag of his favorite cookies. I said, Mark, here's some peanut butter cookies, 2 of them, fresh baked. You're going to love them, right? Here's what I want you to do. When my kids show up, understand this, Mark. They don't want to talk to you, okay? Just know that. But I know you don't want to talk to him. He's like, yeah, you're right. I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to eat your cookie. I want you to smile, and I want you to point like that. Eat cookie, smile, and point. Eat cookie, smile, and point. Person behind the front desk, eat cookie, smile, and point. Eat cookie, smile, and point. So now when kids were showing up, instead of they were still being yelled at, but when they got to the front gate guy right there, Front gate guy gave him a smile. Person behind the counter gave him a smile. X-ray machine person gave him a smile. All the people in the offices gave him a smile. Probation officer gave him a smile. And we saw this big, huge environmental change with kids just because of cookies. Let me ask you this. How many of you would attend a meeting on a regular basis where you knew nobody liked you, nobody smiled at you, nobody shook your hand, and they even kind of made fun of you or belittled you, right? None of you. None of you would go to that program. I wouldn't go to that program, right? And the thing is, I see that happening on campuses all the time. After maybe about 4 weeks of handing Mark these cookies, he said, I don't want cookies anymore. I'm like, you don't? He goes, nope, they gave me diabetes. No, I'm just kidding. He said, I know what you're doing. And I said, you do? And he goes, yeah. He says, I see the kids and I notice you're making a difference in their life and we're making a difference. I go, yeah, we're a team. This was crazy to me and it totally changed the environment of the program. When that car came in and it pulled around by his little shack thing right there where you open the gate, you know what Mark did? And this is crazy to me. Mark walked out of his booth. He walked over and he opened a kid's door. Opened the kid's door. He looked at the kid. He goes, man, I'm glad you're here. Dude, woo, you're running kind of late on time, man. Get in there. They're waiting for you. I know they're not going to start till you get in here. Man, we're glad you're here. And all of a sudden, it changed this program. They saw success in their program. And one of the problems that they started to see afterwards is they started to see kids who were getting the reward button hit inside their brain in that program. They had law enforcement who was helping them survive, who was protecting them and had a relationship with them. And they saw a complete change in the program. And the problem they were facing once we were done with them after about 8 months is kids did not want to leave the program. They wanted to volunteer because they were no longer, they were now getting something at this program that they were not getting at home. Understand that for those of you that are working with kids, you want to give kids something in their head, some type of reward, some kind of way that they're going to survive. You want to put that inside their head and they will gravitate towards your program. Our house on our block when our kids were growing up was what I would consider a safe house. It was a house that we had designed that would go in and it would hit a kid's reward button inside their head. Now, what does that mean? I know a lot of people think, well, that means what kids can do whatever they want. Not at all. We had some really, really strict rules. I mean, strict rules, but all the rules made sense and they came with an explanation on them. And so one of the things that short circuits the brain in a kid's head is when mom or dad or somebody says, clean your room. And a kid says, why? And then an adult answers, because I'm the dad or I'm the mom. Now, there's going to be times that that happens. But when a kid is asking why, 99% of the time, it's not out of defiance or trying to, usurp your authority. Their brain is trying to figure out, why is it important to clean my room? We had all of these really strict rules at our house, and kids followed them and they protected the rules. I remember sitting in the living room playing video games with all these kids. My son, I interacted with the kids a little bit, but my son and daughter, loved the house and kids would come over. And we had one new kid show up and he started to make fun of this other kid. He did, for how he was playing video games. There were people in the room like, no, man, we don't do that here. We don't make fun of the kids. If he can't play right, he can't play right, but we're definitely not going to make fun of that kid for doing. And he was like, whoa. And all of a sudden it made sense. I knew that it was working when we had a mom come over, banged on our door, right? And opens up the door. She looks at my wife. She was like more puzzled than she was mad. And she looked and she goes, my son just came home and told me a story. And my wife's like, ooh, what was that story? And she goes, my son said that he vacuumed your house. And I'm like, yeah. My wife goes, yeah, he's great, man. He does a great job vacuuming. And he goes, I cannot get that kid to clean his room. How did you get him to vacuum your house? So my wife explained to him about the reward system inside that stuff. he knew that he was protecting this environment that he loved. So all of you that are watching right now, if you're working with kids, please learn and not learn. Please go back to speaking that emotional language, because that's what kids speak. If you're speaking intelligence and they're speaking emotion, understand the two languages don't like each other. A kid will sit there and nod their head, or they may even agree with you. But the thing is, yeah, the thing is, it's going to hit their head and it's going to bounce off. Like I said, probation saw a huge difference once we got to that place where they were speaking an emotional language to kids. Were they still giving them the same information? 100%. But the difference is they were wrapping it in emotion first. Take all that stuff we talked about, addiction, turn it in a kid's head, get them addicted to you as a program, talk to them on an emotional level, and have cookies, right? So, Dave, I think I'm there, man. And so let me open it up to any kind of questions or anything people may have. Is that okay? Take about a minute or two. Okay, good. So let me put my glass on. You put something in the chat, or you can, ask questions straight out, turn your camera on, however you want to do it. Oh.
One of the cool things while you guys are coming up with your questions, if you have anything about Loma Linda, is it's Loma Linda Grand Terrace is it's known as one of those blue zones, where they have really healthy lifestyles. People tend to live longer in these areas. So it was really cool to see this program with such a high success rate come out of this area, because the Loma Linda Grand Terrace area of Southern California is very I forgot what's the prevalent religion there. It's a
Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventist.
So yeah,
and no meat, no red meat, but they're very, very cognizant of healthy lifestyles, healthy living. It's probably two of the nicest cities to live in,
right,
in the Inland Empire. So it's a really neat opportunity.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's only 2 blue zones in the country. And that was one of them. So not that I really followed any of that, but I'm going to put my LinkedIn up there, Dave. If people want to join me on LinkedIn, I have a whole bunch of stuff that I'm starting to put on LinkedIn that's more on the business side. So it does not look like we have any questions.
Cassie, do you have a question? I saw your camera pop on. I'm not sure.
I was just going to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope the information was helpful for you. Just, a little bit different way to think about running a youth program and stuff. And I know, parents always have the thing like, I feel like I'm talking English to my kid, but they're not getting it. So, yeah. But yeah, thank you, Cassie, for that. I appreciate it.
And I will say, some of the most successful coalitions that and here in Idaho that I've come across over the last 2.5 years, they do implement a lot of the things that Ray is talking about. I mean, all of our youth coalitions that are successful, it was really neat to be able to walk and tour SIA out in Idaho Falls. Me and Ray got a chance to spend some time with BYDC this summer, and working with their kids and just tying a lot of these ideas into their programming. Even Charlene Johnson with Upriver, Natasha and Kelly with Clearwater. A lot of these ideas are tied in, but the key is, it's always good to hear it, even if you're doing the right thing, because it reaffirms that you're on the right path, and that you should always look for ways to continue to bolster the good things you're doing. And if you are struggling, I can tell you right now, the times where me and my teenage daughter are at odds the most is when I'm trying to speak intelligence and she's emotion.
Right.
It's pure emotion, and I'm trying to figure out why this teenager, who's very smart, will not just get with the program. So.
Yeah. Get with the program. I love that, Dave. Yeah. Well, Dave, every time I worked with you in Southern California, you did, the emotional stuff really well. Kids gravitated towards you. So, yeah. Well, good. If there's nothing else, I guess everybody can go about their day, right?
Yep, I think we're good. I believe Lindsay did put in a post survey. If you guys could grab that, it's real quick. Gives us some data that we can use to add to our report in February, or those great grant reports that Ray was talking about that we always save till the last possible second. If you miss it in the chat. We'll be emailing it out to everybody who registered. So thank you, Ray, for giving us the last hour and a half. And thank you, everybody, for giving us part of your day, and let us know if there's anything we can do for you.
I also just wanted to quickly mention that this was recorded. So if anyone, I know that IDEFI already reached out for that recording. So if anyone that's still on the call wants that recording as well, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Perfect. All right, I am leaving. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.